During this last century that was the year 2020, there were some bad games, there were terrible games, there were delayed games, then there were bad delayed games, and finally, there were some okay games. Titles that achieved a shining gold standard of mediocrity built around familiar mechanics and recreated from the best original games of yesteryear. Nothing original, everything derivative, and all safely boring to guarantee a maximum standard unit of sale to satisfy shareholders. And we ate them all up, wrapped in our warm blankets inside our air-conditioned houses during a year of horrors and stay-at-home orders. In a year of absolute insanity, these are the best games that 2020 had to offer. Starting at the bottom of the list is Doom Eternal. Now, you may ask, just what is the deal here? Why on earth is such a good game, one that I even said in my own review was worth full price, languishing at the bottom of the list? The answer is pretty straightforward. I forgot about this game after I finished it. For me, this lands it squarely in the realm of unmemorable, despite its quality. I'm uncertain of just what that says about me versus what it says about the game, but I do know that going back to think about Doom Eternal, it never led me to say to myself, damn, that was awesome. There's a lot in Doom Eternal that's made well, including the constant flow of combat, interesting collectibles, weapon upgrades, and bits of story to suss out. However, while all the pieces individually are almost uniformly well made and polished, after you put them together and walk away, it turns out to be very paint by the numbers. That's the feeling I ended up with after all was said and done. A finely tuned experience that looks great up close and in the moment, but with distance, it seems more formulaic and nothing about it stood out enough for me to really commit to memory. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. This is a top 5 list of what was good, so why am I being so negative? Well, suffice to say, I don't know what there is to add after the review I did. While I could heap more praise on it, the year has made me cynical, so instead, I'm taking the time to say that even though some games are amazing in the moment as you play them, you just forget about most of the experience after you move on. That's what Doom Eternal is. An amazingly well-polished paint-by-numbers type of FPS that absolutely is worth playing. But short of falling in love with it, the technical shine doesn't mean it's going to be seared into your brain. At least, it wasn't for me. Which is why it comes in at the lowest slot on my list, at number 5. Oh boy, where to begin with this one? The fact that the Final Fantasy VII Remake managed to be good enough to even make it to my top 5 list is amazing within itself. This game admittedly had a real difficult line to walk, as the original is a beloved cult classic, but many adjustments to the story here were a step too far. I'll never forget the long and epic tale playing the original when I was 13, and measuring up to such childhood wonderment is pretty much impossible. That being said, the remake is still pretty good. Taken at face value, the story is relatively swift, combat is tight, voice acting is on point, and the visuals are at least plenty decent. It was a real pleasure to see so many of the characters portrayed with full personalities too, as the proper voice acting goes a long way in selling the story. For instance, it's infinitely more clear in the remake just why anybody would follow someone like Barrett with his overtly rough personality. The way he speaks and carries himself is just full of confidence, and he also knows how to rally people around him and the ideals he holds. Just character portrayals are a big part of what makes this game so good, but more important than that is the actual combat. The active battle system is smooth and creates a pretty good control system for some of the more chaotic fights. On that note, boss battles are for the most part fun and glorious spectacles. Some of them can be drawn out, but the process of balancing who to play as and queuing up and issuing commands is surprisingly satisfying. The system just overall hits a nice middle ground between active engagement and strategy. This also plays well into how you can level up your characters, your materia, and modify equipment. Structurally, the game is incredibly stable. You explore the world for materia and equipment, get into fights in the process, and all of the combat improves your equipment. There's nothing new or even special about this balancing act, it's just well done here. Well, enough in fact that I found myself having the most fun when seeking out all of the arena combat challenges. The Final Fantasy VII Remake has its issues, including some sections being more complex and drawn out than they need to be, and many characters are given more backstory than they need or even deserve. But it is good, and much to my surprise, miles ahead of the disaster class mess I was expecting it to be, which actually plays a large role in why it sits on my list at number 4. No year would be complete without a zombie game, and Resident Evil 3 is honestly one of the brightest highlights of this particular installment of Anno Domini. Back when I reviewed this game, I took issue with the price tag, and that issue still stands. $60 was and still is too much for how little there is here. However, that assessment doesn't address quality, as the actual content of this game holds up. It's a fun action-adventure romp through a burning city during a zombie outbreak. It's frankly not structured a lot like other games you get today. It has a beginning, middle, and end. There's no grind wheel of content to work through, the world isn't all that open, and areas you explore are actually pretty small. The briefness of this game also plays to its benefit, despite conflicting with its hefty price tag. The pacing stays steady, it never feels like you're stuck in one location for too long, and you're sufficiently rewarded for exploring every area. On that note, the world itself manages to straddle the line between large and small, because the long snaking routes you take makes things feel larger than they are. A lot of Resident Evil 3 sits in a sweet spot of being just enough to be a lot of fun, even though it's on the shorter side. In fact, it's one of the few games this year I had the most fun playing through again to get footage of, which is why it sits on my list at number 3. Given the type of year that 2020 has been, a multiplayer-driven game was going to find its way into my list somewhere. And honestly, you couldn't really get a better game to break through that barrier of, I don't really like multiplayer. That's an important thing to understand about me. I typically don't enjoy multiplayer games much, if at all. In fact, I actively avoid them. Deep Rock Galactic is the wrong type of game for me to enjoy, and yet, here it is. Normally, the story in a game takes priority for me, as especially the small, insignificant side quests tend to be the place where I find the most interesting world building, which I greatly enjoy. Deep Rock Galactic has little to none of that. Overall, this game is concerned with one thing and one thing only: gameplay. The idea is simple and forward. In a futuristic space fantasy, you are a dwarf that works for the Deep Rock Galactic Mining Company. You choose a job role, team up with other miners, and run mission after mission in the highly dangerous mines down on the planet. That's all there is to it. The game rests heavily on you just playing it rather than telling you some grand story or fleshing out your character. This isn't a bad move either, as there's still plenty of variety in what to do. There are 9 biomes for missions to take place in, levels are randomly generated, and there are a variety of modifiers that can change the difficulty of each run in unique and quirky ways. Additionally, every level has random cosmetics to find for your weapons and equipment, extra objectives to complete for bonus pay, and unique challenges to hunt down as well. Then, when you get back to base, there are beards to unlock, special drinks to learn how to brew, perk points to spend, and just a litany of collectibles both extra and functional to engage with. Deep Rock Galactic is short on story, but that's intentional. For all it lacks in explicit world building and storytelling, there's just so much engaging content to chew on here that makes it tons of fun. Honestly, the only thing holding this game back is how the gameplay loop and grind wheel is so short that it gets repetitive fairly quickly. But that mostly leads to shortening the overall game sessions rather than making it unfun to play. In other words, even after I'm done for the night, I still have a small itch to keep going, and know that I'll return to the mines of Hoxus 4 soon again. All of this and more is why Deep Rock Galactic secures itself in spot 2 on my list for 2020. Animal Crossing is by far the game that, while I saw it coming from a mile away, took me by surprise for how much I've enjoyed it. For me, this franchise fell off the radar for years because it stuck to the DS and 3DS, and I'm just not a big mobile gamer. Chalk it up to not enjoying small screens and wanting a full-size controller in my hands. New Horizons, however, turned into the one fun game that I enjoy by indulging in the daily grind. There's no competition, no other players to watch jump around and make a mess of things. Basically, loading it up and doing a bunch of daily tasks with no pressure or interruption is what makes it so appealing. Add to this all of the seasonal events, the regular introduction of new activities to do, all of the customization and decorating, and you get a game whose message is to slow down and relax. 2020 has been a big year with so many new events on a regular basis that it feels much longer. For me, Animal Crossing New Horizons, with its slow pace, stretched out gameplay loop, and inclusion of some mechanics that take an entire day to complete, has been the reminder for me to take time and relax every day. Nothing here is pressuring you to go further or push harder. You just sit down, take it easy, maybe go diving, catch some fish, slowly build the secluded paradise you want, complete the museum collections, catch some bugs, build a snowboy. In a year of big and scary events, having a game to help you step back and decompress is worth its weight in gold. And that is why Animal Crossing New Horizons is my game of the year for 2020. And you thought we were done. But before going, I really do have to take a moment and complain about a game that completely stole my time and money. The review for it wasn't very popular, but you know what? I gotta tear into this thing one last time. Paper Mario, the Origami King, is just a bunch of amazing art design and fun personalities run through a shredder by its own absolutely terrible and obtuse mechanical game design. I don't want to go into details, you can go back and watch the review for the big breakdown. However, I will repeat that building an entire game around a turn-based battle system that doesn't make you stronger and only rewards you with worthless currency is a terrible idea that only serves to slow the pace of the entire experience. If you're running away from your battle system at several turns, you gone done fucked up. Never in my life have I bought a game at full price and then hated it so much that I just stopped playing it at the final level. I've stopped other games at the final level in the past, but because of difficulty. Never from being fed up with bullshit mechanics. This franchise is dead to me. I will never buy another entry in it, and I'd advise everyone to keep your masks on, wash your damn hands, and socially distance from Paper Mario the Origami King at all times. Ad infinitum.